Welcome to BeaconLive's Marketing Series webinar, LinkedIn for Business and Personal Branding, tapping into the 150 million member business network. And now I'd like to introduce our presenters, two of LinkedIn's leading experts, Chuck Hester and Neil Schaefer. Chuck Hester has 30 years of experience in public relations, branding, and social media. Internationally, he is a known speaker on using LinkedIn for business. Chuck is the author of the book, Linking In to Pay It Forward, Changing the Value Proposition in Social Media, as well as the founder of LinkedIn Live, in-person networking events. Neil Schaefer has over 15 years of experience in B2B high-tech sales, marketing, and business development, and has been recognized by Forbes as a top 30 social media power influencer and creator of Ad Age Top 100 Global Marketing blog Windmill Networking. And a bit about our sponsor, BeaconLive. It is a full-service webinar and webcast provider who specializes in delivering online continuing education solutions. When BeaconLive partners with a company to deliver online events, we facilitate every detail behind the events, from the initial registration setup and the delivery of the live event, all the way to the final editing and repurposing on-demand events. For a quick housekeeping notes before I hand the presentation over. Everyone in the audience who's interested in following the live discussion on Twitter for this webinar, the hashtag is BeaconLinkedIn. Following the presentation, Mr. Schaefer and Mr. Hester will be available for a question and answer session. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the chat pod in the lower left-hand side of your browser. Following the Q&A session, you will be delivered to a post-event evaluation where you can request to sign up for any emails or e-books. And now I'm going to pass the conference over to you, Mr. Hester.
Thank you, and welcome to everybody who's attending today. Just a little bit more about who I am and what I'm involved with. I've been on LinkedIn for over 6.5 years. I have 11,500 direct connections. As a matter of fact, Neil Schaefer and I met through LinkedIn and now are both in the Southern California area, and it's a pleasure and an honor to get a chance to co-present with Neil. We've done it in the past, and as was mentioned earlier, we'll be around after the seminar for questions and answers, so we look forward to doing that. And at this time, I'm going to pass it over to my partner, Neil Schaefer.
Well, thank you very much, Chuck, and yes, it is an honor to be presenting together. We were just, both of us introduced obviously by the moderator, and I think it's really, really important that when you hear people present on social media that you get a feel for what their background is, and this will give you a better idea as to how they approach social media. So my background, as was mentioned, is in B2B high-tech sales, marketing, and biz dev. I also have a unique experience in launching sales organizations from scratch in Asia for a few companies and speak Japanese and Chinese, and it's that experience now helping companies launch into foreign markets has a lot of similarities with companies trying to figure out social media and really implement it internally for their business, and that's what I do now as a social media strategy consultant and coach. But enough about me. Let's move on to talking about how you can leverage LinkedIn for your business and personal branding. And so the first thing I think we need to talk about is why LinkedIn. And LinkedIn has always been sort of the dark horse of social media. When you see a television ad appearing for consumers, you'll see it'll have a Facebook icon, a Twitter icon. It's not going to have a LinkedIn icon. LinkedIn is not that type of a place. It is really for professionals. It's for networking, although we are seeing more brands start to target LinkedIn for the professional demographic consumer. But what's happened over the last year with LinkedIn is it has become incredibly popular for many reasons. We had the IPO. Many people now are understanding the potential for LinkedIn from a professional and personal perspective, and companies are starting to understand the importance of it as well. And it's gotten to the point now where you're looking at the most trafficked or the highest traffic websites in the country, LinkedIn right now is number 10. LinkedIn gets about as much website traffic as eBay or Craigslist does. So it's no longer a small little platform, a niche platform. It is one of the top 10 sites in the United States. And I would add that it's also number 12 worldwide right now. So it is a global phenomenon. There are countries like the Netherlands that are actually, LinkedIn would come up as like number 6. So it really is becoming a global platform now, and there's a lot of traffic going there, meaning for businesses it's important, and for your professional branding it is equally important. Now when we talk about how do businesses generate leads and acquire customers in social media, our friends at HubSpot have come out with some very, very interesting data that I'd like to share, because it really shows that there is a lot of business to be found on LinkedIn if you know how to do it right. On the left there, if we were to promote something on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter with the same link, what is going to be the visit to lead conversion rate? LinkedIn is 3 times more efficient than Facebook and Twitter. Even on the right there, you see customer acquisition by channel. LinkedIn is still tops. Company blog second, Facebook and Twitter below. And the reason is that LinkedIn may not have the 900 million users that Facebook has or the 500 million users that Twitter has. It only has 150 million users, but it's targeted. It's targeted to businesses and the professional demographic. You don't have 18-year-olds on LinkedIn like you would have on Facebook, and you don't have 13-year-olds pretending that they're 18-year-olds on LinkedIn like you have on Facebook. So it is a smaller, very, very high-quality network, and that's why there's tremendous opportunities for professionals, for businesses, and for brands that want to try to sell to those professionals. Another misnomer about LinkedIn is when I'm going to look for a job, I'll work on my profile on LinkedIn. And that's the attitude that a lot of people that I know and that I meet have about LinkedIn. And if you treat it as such, then that's all it will be for you. But if you look at it as an extremely important business tool, you can get more out of it. And I compiled this statistic to show you that LinkedIn is not just for headhunters. In fact, if we look at the number of users on LinkedIn by industry, and we add the human resources and staffing and recruiting numbers together, those 2 industries would not even be in the top 10. Okay? Number 1 is IT and services. Number 2 is financial services. Number 3, computer software. The LinkedIn user base represents the professional demographic user base. And although a lot of people get pinged or contacted by recruiters and headhunters, they represent 1% or so of the user population. In fact, I recently presented for some graphic designers, and we found that the architecture and design, as well as the graphic design industries combined, actually had a bigger user base than HR and staffing and recruiting. So LinkedIn definitely is not just for headhunters, and you shouldn't treat it that way either. So going forward on LinkedIn now, we're talking about how do we set ourselves up for success for our business and for our personal branding. And it really starts with your profile. I cannot overemphasize this enough. It is your website on LinkedIn. So the first thing you need to do is you need to get your own house in order. And 5 very, very easy to understand tips, and there's more tips I could give, but if I was to compile everything into the 5 things you should be doing, number 1, be real. This means actually listing your full name. LinkedIn gives you the option to have an initial on your last name. If you went to a networking event, would you have an initial on your last name? You probably wouldn't, right? Would I say on a business card or at a networking event, would I say Neil, social media expert Schaefer? I wouldn't. And that's why in your name you should really only have your name. Because some people in a professional environment, it may be a turnoff if you try to pretend that you need to put a label on yourself where your name is. There's also an area for a photo. Now, I know 2 women that have stalkers that are looking for them, and therefore they prefer not to put their photo on their LinkedIn profile. And as a matter of personal security, if you are in that situation, you shouldn't. But anyone outside of that situation, you really should have your photo. There's a few reasons why. Number 1, there are a lot of fake profiles on LinkedIn, so a photo shows that you're real. But number 2, you have to remember that social media is about people. It's not about businesses. And having a photo of yourself is the ultimate way to create a human connection. So if there is someone looking to do business with you, or potentially a recruiter looking for you, having a photo versus not having a photo, I believe those people with a photo are going to be contacted much higher than people without the photo. So keep it real. Have a photo. You know, if you're looking for a job, I know some people worry about age discrimination, but if you're not looking for a job, that really should not come into play here. And I just cannot overemphasize that you should have that photo. So number 2, be complete. One of the amazing things about LinkedIn is it's built upon a search engine. It's built upon a search engine for profiles. And this is where it is uniquely different from a Facebook or a Twitter, where on LinkedIn you begin to wonder what salespeople did before LinkedIn. How did you find people who work at companies who had specific titles? But the only way you're going to get found for a number of different experiences that you have and expertise and specialties that you have is if you complete your profile. Your profile is not just talking about what you do now. What did you do in the past? You know, if you worked 30 years ago at a company, you never know where those people are today. You never know how you may be able to help them out or they help you out. You never know what is going to come up on the search results and what people are looking for. You know, I worked at a semiconductor company in the 1990s. I have that on my profile because I don't know where those people are today. They may be in social media for all I know. My former boss may be a decision maker at a company I'm trying to sell into. So because of that fact, LinkedIn gives you a lot of real estate. Complete it. Don't just do it for your current job. The third note is about being branded. And the branding, you know, I'm not a branding expert. I just consider branding, you know, differentiating yourself from other people and showcasing your strengths. And the way you do this on a site like LinkedIn is you need to do it through your words. And the most important place is that professional summary that appears next to your picture and name on top of your profile and in the search results. And that's what people are looking at to decide who they want to contact. So you need to have a summary that, or a headline I should say, that really pops out at people that showcases what you do. If you just say, you know, Vice President of Marketing, it's not going to tell people much. If you say specializing in marketing to emerging markets, you've branded yourself as an emerging market specialist, and therefore the people that contact you are going to be more targeted as well. Some great ideas for branding. Do a keyword search as to how people would find you. Look at what other headlines come up, and I think you're going to get some great ideas as to how to differentiate yourself. And then you need to follow up that professional headline branding in your summary. So, Vice President of Marketing or Emerging Markets Marketing Specialist. Well, in my summary, if I'm saying I'm an Emerging Markets Marketing Specialist, I need to now back that up with what I've done in that to further deliver on that brand promise. The fourth note here is being searchable. I mentioned that LinkedIn is a search engine, so make sure that any keyword that is associated with you or what you do or with your company or industry is somewhere in your profile. And finally, be recommended. LinkedIn recommends, pun intended, that you have 3 recommendations in order to get to 100% profile completeness. If you've worked for 10, 20, 30 years, you have hiring managers, you have colleagues. I know some people are shy about this, but once again, recommendations show that you're real, and you never know when someone actually knows the person that's making the recommendation, which gives you additional credibility. So make sure, the 2 things that people complain about when I present this is the photo and the recommendations, but I really do think that they're important, and make a small investment. I think it's going to pay dividends for you in the future. So you have established your home page. Let's talk about building your network. And you do not have to be an open networker like Chuck was or like I am, because even if you only have a few hundred connections, you're going to have thousands, if not tens of thousands, second-degree connections. And that's the power that you're only one phone call or one email away from so many people. And that is why it's better to have 20 connections than 10. It's better to have 100 than 90. Obviously, you need to ideally know these people or have some sort of professional rapport with them, but in the end of the game, the more connections you have, the more second-degree connections show up to you, and the more you appear to others as a second-degree connection as well. So once again, very, very important in order to get optimal presence on the site, you'll want to build up those connections. So this is where most people fail. They put up their profile, they get connected, they wait, and nothing happens. Okay? It's similar to going to a networking meeting. There's one person that's working the room, meeting people, getting business cards, and someone else that's on the wall, becoming a wallflower, saying, what a boring networking event. Why am I wasting my time here? No one's coming up to speak with me. It is the exact same thing. There are 150 million people waiting for you. It is a virtual 24/7 online networking event. So engage. And there's many, many different ways to engage in LinkedIn. Updating your network with a status update is a way to engage. It's a way to keep in touch. It's a way to tell people what you've been reading, what you've been doing, as is following the updates of your network and seeing if there's a way that you can help other people, pay it forward. Making an introduction is another great way. Think if you introduced two people in your network to each other maybe once a week or even once a month, and it's a valuable introduction. It's going to help you build mind share with those two people that will more than likely pay off in the future. Obviously, as we circle on the bottom right here, we have groups and answers, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that separately. But even participating in events or recommending books on Amazon, putting that on your profile if you keep up to date on the latest books in your industry, and then through this Amazon Reading List application, seeing who else has read those books, and then maybe contacting them as an icebreaker that you've read the same book. What did you think about that book? So there's many, many different ways to engage. I do believe that the groups and the answers are probably the easiest and most common ways of engagement, but just make it a habit. Make it a habit of once a day or even once a week of sparking a new conversation somewhere with someone. And I think if you keep to that, and those are targeted people, and you have a targeted profile, once again, you're going to be able to build up relationships of high and relevant value. And the groups, there are more than 1.1 million groups. So for whatever keyword you enter to search for a LinkedIn group, you're going to find a group that is relevant to you. And some of these groups have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of members. The two key benefits of being in a group are that each group has targeted discussions that you can participate in. You can start one, comment on one, and you also have the ability to send messages to other group members regardless of your connectivity status. So you may only have 100 connections, but if you join this group that has 650,000 members and they have the default setting that allows you to contact each other through LinkedIn groups, you're going to be able to potentially contact hundreds of thousands of people. So you can join a maximum of 50 groups. I recommend you join 50. And before you complain that you don't want to deal with 50 daily and weekly digests, joining a group and signing up for these digests are two completely different things. You can shut off all the digests. Go into the groups when you need them, when you need to contact someone or when you're looking for a new contact or you want to join in a relevant discussion. But to give you an idea of the types of groups that I recommend you join, there are big groups, groups that have a lot of members. There's one that ExecuNet has called Executive Suite. So if you are an executive yourself or targeting executives, it's a no-brainer group to join, and it has a few 100,000 members. There are local groups, so keyword your city, county, state, country. You're going to find tons of groups to join. Alumni groups for your college, university, or for where the company you work at or used to work at. Industry groups, target market groups. So there's no lack of groups that you can join. I highly recommend 50 for that reason. And maybe you create a calendar, one group a day you check out, and maybe you see some groups have a lot of spam. You move on to other groups. I think through the art of doing that, you're going to find a lot of great people, a lot of great conversations that's going to lead to greater knowledge, and it will uncover business opportunities, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So now I'm going to move the presentation over to Chuck.
Thank you, Neil. A lot of great information and a lot to digest. And that's one of the things I want to mention, too. There is a lot of information, and Neil and I do this on a daily basis. So, if you do have questions later on, feel free to either ask during the session itself or contact us later. A couple of things I want to walk through, and that's basic LinkedIn tips for business. And I've got a couple of slides on that. I'm really advocate about the fact that your profile needs to be searchable, and as Neil mentioned earlier, it's very important to do that. But the other thing that's interesting about the profile itself is that you can customize your profile. So for instance, you have a capability of putting up to 3 websites listed on your profile. Change that information. Don't just say company website as the default that comes from LinkedIn. Change it to LinkedIn company website or whatever it may be, and personalize that URL so folks know which type of website they'd be clicking on if they were looking for that information from your profile. It helps really well. Also, invite current and potential customers to connect directly. A lot of times folks are on LinkedIn and they may be potential customers for you or your business. It's a really good way to get connected is to ask them if they're on LinkedIn, and in a conversation or an email or a phone call you may have, oh, by the way, are you on LinkedIn? Let's connect directly there. What that does for you is it allows you to get information about that potential customer or current customer that you may not have had before. You can find out where they went to school, past jobs they had, and what I call commonalities, and that's one of the biggest aspects of LinkedIn. It's finding commonalities that will allow you to connect better and deeper with your connections. As Neil mentioned earlier, join groups where your customers live and be part of that discussion. 50 groups is somewhat a significant number, but it makes sense if you're prospecting and you're looking for customers or you want to be part of that. But my caveat, my caution there is to make sure you're not talking to colleagues and just talking to yourself. So for instance, I'm a public relations professional. I could join 50 public relations groups in a heartbeat on LinkedIn. But I'm not talking necessarily to folks who are going to be buying my products and services. So you want to find where your customers are and be part of the discussion and become a subject matter expert within the group. And actually that will raise your capital for the customer when it comes time for them to pull the trigger. Also, use LinkedIn to connect with current and potential customers when you travel. That's actually how Neil Schaefer and I met. I was traveling to Southern California in the process of relocating back here. I came out and connected with him, and we met directly. I never eat alone. I mean, that's somewhat of a cliche, but whenever I'm traveling to any type of business in Chicago, New York, Boston, wherever it may be, the first thing that I do is look at my connections, find out who happens to be in that particular city. But I also put out a question on answers, which basically says, I'm coming to the Boston area, love to get together and meet with you, and just to get to know you better from LinkedIn. The interesting aspect of that is, and the axiom that I use is, take the meeting. This person may not be a person that you see by looking at their LinkedIn profile as somebody that you want to connect with because you're going to do business with them per se, but you never know. And the rule of thumb there is usually the person you're connected with directly is not the person you're going to do business with. It's the person that they're connected with and their connections that can potentially become customers for you. So something to seriously consider. Always take the connections to the next level, whether it be a Skype phone call or a telephone call, email, and an in-person. Some tips as far as how to build up your connections and as you go. And by the way, LinkedIn has the 500 plus rule, which basically means if you get above 500 connections, they will not show how many connections you have on your profile. So if you see somebody with 500 plus, they obviously have more than that. It just depends on whether or not they're open or not to be able to see the actual connections. But I would suggest connecting with the connectors. There's a website called the Top 100 LinkedIn Connections. And basically, when I was building my connections, I went out and actually invited all 100 of those connectors to connect with me directly. 99 of them said yes. And so what I did after that is once I connected with that one person, then I went into their connections, looked for 5 other connections that might be of interest, and asked them to connect as well. It's a great way to start to build your information. Also, when you join key groups, you want to post your profile. So a quick introduction as a discussion is perfectly all right within the group etiquette. So you can come in and say, hey, I'm Chuck Hester. I do public relations and marketing. I live in Dana Point. I'm glad to be part of the group, and I'm interested in knowing how I can help you. So that's a nice way to kind of subtly market you and your businesses without being very blatant. And always personalize your invitations. You get generic invitations are very easy to send out. You get an email address. There's a script there that says, I would like you to join my LinkedIn network, and it lists your name there, and you could hit a send button. If you do that, basically, Neil used the name tag aspect of a networking event. I always like to say, if somebody walks in the room with a paper bag on their head and no name tag, would you connect with them directly? That's a generic invitation to me. I know nothing about that person other than what I may see on the profile. If you get a generic invitation and it looks like somebody might be of interest, you can always hit the reply button and say, please tell me more about you, and change that value proposition by saying, and let me know how I can help you or how I can be of service to you. And it's a good way to do that. And always, when you're talking to contacts, whether it's at a networking event, Chamber of Commerce event, whether you're taking them to dinner or whatever, always ask them if they're linked and on LinkedIn, and then link in directly with them as well. And then the other thing, and one was my daily tip today, answer the invitations in a timely but reasonable manner. And I have to emphasize reasonable. If you get 15 invitations in a week and you're answering them all day long, then that takes up a lot of time. 2 to 3 to 4 business days is sufficient as far as answering those invitations back, and don't feel like you have to answer them as soon as they come in. And Neil mentioned earlier there are settings that you can set up for digests for groups. Same thing you can do for your invitations. If you don't want to receive emails from LinkedIn, you can just set it up for web only, where all you're going to see is the information once you log on to the LinkedIn application on the web. So 4 areas to market you and your business on LinkedIn is groups. We've talked a lot about groups, but it's really important to be part of that discussion. And I strongly suggest, when I set up groups for my clients, I strongly suggest that they sit back and listen for about 2 to 3 days to get a feel for the group and how they talk and how they interact with each other, and then be part of the discussions. Company pages. If you do not have a company page, make sure you put a company page together, but be careful with that company page. We just did some criticism on the Mitt Romney company page in the association. It was just an Inc. magazine article yesterday, as a matter of fact. So the problem with that, they didn't even have a summary as to what the organization was all about. And you can do the summary, plus you can do the products and services tab, which then becomes live links back to your sales websites. It's an excellent way to drive business from LinkedIn and prospects directly in there. And we talked about the status bar. You can link your Twitter account to the status bar as well. It's 140 characters for a reason. LinkedIn's really good about looking at social media sites and finding out how things are going well for Facebook, Twitter. For instance, the company page, by the way, you can do a follow a company, you can do a like the company, you can do share information from the company pages. Same with the status bar. You can set it up where you do 140 characters, you click a little button on that has the Twitter symbol, and it will automatically also post to your Twitter account as well. And one of the areas that I think is probably the most underutilized marketing tool on LinkedIn is answers. And that's basically an area where you can go in, ask a question, and people will answer that question who consider themselves subject matter experts or get opinions on what's going on. It's a very subtle way to market your services. For instance, if you happen to be an offshore manufacturer, you can post a question that says, do you prefer offshore or onshore manufacturing, and why? People come back and answer those questions. The one that say, hey, offshore manufacturing makes a lot of sense, you can actually privately answer the folks who respond and be able to tell them more about your business in a private way, and so it's not considered spam or overt marketing on LinkedIn. Whoops, I missed one, sorry. There we go. I always like to talk about Easter eggs, and Easter eggs are a really cool way to find information. As I mentioned earlier, Neil and I live on LinkedIn on a regular basis, so we know a lot of this information that some people may not know. One of the first ones is, as we talked about with the status bar, keep your network up to date and promote your brand. Promote the heck out of your brand. And I'll show you a page that I put together in a little bit. I do a LinkedIn tip a day, and it goes out on LinkedIn and Twitter as well, 7 days a week. It's a nice way to promote what I do and who I am, and really brand myself as a LinkedIn subject matter expert. Also, as we mentioned, connect your Twitter account to your LinkedIn account. It's a nice way to be able to get information out to 2 different networks and broaden the reach of the people that you may want to. There's a lot of times where folks may not be on LinkedIn, but they might be on Twitter, or they may not be on Twitter, but they're on LinkedIn, so it's a nice way to be able to do that. I can't emphasize enough, when I do my 3-hour LinkedIn boot camps for corporations, we talk a lot about privacy settings. The biggest difference between Facebook and LinkedIn is that Facebook has a tendency to do something and then ask for forgiveness later, whereas LinkedIn will default to a stronger privacy setting. And so it really take its time and look at your account settings, and you had the opportunity to decide how you interact on LinkedIn. It's not the other way around. LinkedIn does not control how you interact with folks on LinkedIn. Also, the company pages are great gateways for your website landing pages. Great marketing tool for what you've got. If you aren't listing products and services, please take time to do so. Folks will come to your website, and actually, I have sales folks that I have worked with who are using the company page as an introduction within an email to potential customers. And they're saying, check out our company page and look at our products and services. Click through what makes sense for you, and then I can give you further information. It's really an online brochure for your company's services and capabilities. This is what is known as Twyla, and basically it's LinkedIn tips that I do on a regular basis. It gives information, and Twyla will take all of my tweets and compile them into subject matter areas. So this one in particular, because I do a lot of LinkedIn tips, there's a lot of information about LinkedIn on here, so it's a really cool way to do that. And if you contact me, I can give you the direct URL to be able to find information on that. And we want to take for this next section, we want to take a couple of minutes and talk specifically about some clients that Neil and I work with. And I'm going to take the first one, and this is a company called the DNA Group. And I mentioned offshore manufacturing. This is the one I was talking about. They're an offshore manufacturing firm based in Raleigh, North Carolina. And they actually are headquartered in China. But Devon North America is the group that works there. This is their products and services page. If you notice, they talk about smart grid and electronic, electromechanical contract manufacturing. Folks can follow their group. They have 92 followers as the time of this screenshot. It also talks about information that you need. If you were to click back over to the other tab, if you could, on the overview, a really good overview of where information comes from. Bill Romick, who's the VP of Marketing at DNA and a client of mine, will use the status bar to talk about upcoming trade shows that they're sponsoring or white papers that they've got out. They're using LinkedIn on a regular basis to make sure they're marketing the companies. They also use the answer section. That answer that I mentioned as offshore versus onshore, that was actually a real answer that Bill Romick put out and asked that question and got some really good prospects as a result of that. And then finally, the other part of what DNA is using LinkedIn for is for prospecting for potential recruiting candidates. They have actually posted email information for job postings only on LinkedIn, and they've gotten candidates and filled jobs directly there. One of the reasons that Bill Romick likes to do that is mainly because he's able to see quality candidates who have a lot of good information and with recommendations. So it's almost like seeing a resume and with references all in one place. So he's very comfortable in using this particular platform and tool, not only to promote his company, but to find folks who are good candidates for jobs that he may have open. So this is Devon North America, and I'm going to give control back over to Neil so he can walk through several of his case studies as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Chuck. So when I wrote my second book called Maximizing LinkedIn for Sales and Social Media Marketing, I wanted to prove to the world that business is being developed every day on LinkedIn. It's not as sexy as a Facebook or a Twitter. It's obviously a more savvy atmosphere, but in the background, much of B2B business that we see is being done through people in private conversations, not blasting, flash ads on the sidebar on Facebook. So I went out and I crowdsourced a number of case studies. These are only a few of them from the book, but I think they illustrate a lot of the points that both Chuck and myself have been talking about, and hopefully they will lead you to greater insight into the LinkedIn platform. So we talked about the keywords that matter in your profile. So this is an interesting case study from a Belgian company, and they specialize in consolidated accounting consulting. Now, I actually spent the first 2 years of my career in finance, and maybe some of you don't know, but consolidated accounting means if you're a global conglomerate, you need to bring all the different profit and loss statements from all of your international operations and consolidate it into one global profit and loss statement. And that's what this gentleman does. So it turns out, and when I speak across the country, I ask people how many of you have gotten a lead or business from LinkedIn, and I'm seeing more and more people raise their hands when I ask that. Well, this gentleman got one deal that was equivalent to 50% of his 2010 sales, and he did it after the company contacted him through LinkedIn. And as salespeople and marketing people should do, how did you find me? It turned out that he was the only person that showed up when they did a search in Belgium in the accounting and finance industry for the word consolidation. So just a great example of how you may think that a keyword is trivial to you, but any keyword related to anything that you or your company does, please make sure it is somewhere in your profile so that when people are looking for you or your company, it goes the same with your LinkedIn company profile as more and more people search LinkedIn companies, or if you have your own group, make sure it's in the description of your group as well. I cannot overemphasize that point. So here's another one. We talked about after setting up your profile for success about establishing those connections. And connections work in a lot of different ways. It's sort of like if you go to a website and you see 50 people have already liked it on Facebook, it's sort of like social proof. Well, if 50 other people that I know have already liked it, it must be a good product. And this is a similar example. LinkedIn connections work the same way, because whenever you go to someone's profile, especially if you're a second-degree connection, you can see who are the people that connect you with that person. And Chuck mentioned, getting connected with your customers, and that bears repeating, because your customers know people within the company, within the industry, and that's going to help you for the very same reason I'm going to talk about in the case study. So Email Vision provides email marketing solutions. A French gentleman was in charge of developing business for the Eastern European market, and he was very, very successful at doing that. And then his boss said, okay, now we want you to develop business in Russia. So he utilized his Eastern European contacts to build up his network through LinkedIn in Russia, and by the time he got to the decision maker at Woman Journal, which is one of the biggest online media outlets in Russia, when he got the woman on the phone, the woman remarked that, wow, we already have 18 common connections. So I know I can trust you. You're credible. And that's why establishing your mini web of connections on LinkedIn can give you more credibility to people that have never met you than you may think. So let's look at another case study. We talked about the different ways of engagement and status updates. Now, I'm not going to promise everybody that you're going to be able to make $300,000 off a status update, but I will tell you I have personally gotten business from tweeting. I know others have as well, and it's about building mind share. It's that status update builds mind share in your network. You can have it for public display, so if people are looking at your profile, they can see it as well, which I recommend you do. And this is an example, once again from my book, of a real estate agent in Perth, Western Australia. And I do not recommend that every real estate agent, post their new, houses that they're representing on a daily basis and spamming their network. But once a week, in a very, very savvy and relevant way, hey, we're having an open house this weekend. It's a really cool property. If any of your friends are in the market, let me know. We're having a wine and cheese tasting party, what have you. And what happened was that people that were looking to sell their house also found him on LinkedIn and said, you know what, from your profile updates, it looks like you really understand social media and LinkedIn. We want to work with you. So then this realtor took it one step further and said, hey, network, I want to let you know we're having a pre-listing open house this weekend just for my LinkedIn friends. Give a little bit of exclusivity through that status update. So it was almost like a marketing campaign. We're going to have wine, cheese, coming over, bring your friends. And that weekend, he closed the $300,000 deal for the house before it was even listed publicly. So just one way of, through engagement and status update, you can build that mind share. And as long as those status updates are relevant, they're going to bring targeted people to you, as what happened with this realtor. This is my own case study of how I develop business on LinkedIn in a LinkedIn group. And I mentioned that I'm a member of 50 LinkedIn groups. And a few of them, as Chuck said, it's very, very important to sort of test the waters and listen before even responding. And I found through the art of listening that some groups were more relevant than others in terms of the discussion quality and quantity. So there were a few groups that I signed up for a weekly digest on, and there was one group that had a very, very lively discussion. And I like to join lively discussions because a lot of people sign up for the email notifications. So I know that if I say something, it gets out to a lot of people. But this one particular discussion was called, What's the ROI of Social Media? And when I got the digest, the person that responded, and he was the 300th person or so to respond, said, I challenge you to prove to me the ROI of social media. So I thought, well, that's easy. But instead of responding in the group discussion, I actually went to the person's profile. So you have a lot of different tools on LinkedIn, and just by going through a profile, and Chuck alluded to this as well, we can really find out a lot about other people and try to find data points that connect us. So it turned out, lo and behold, that this person just happened to live in Orange County, California. So 3 million, it was a 2% of the United States population works here. So it was a 1 in 50 chance I got lucky. It also turned out he was a marketing consultant. He did a lot of event marketing. And lo and behold, we were second-degree connections, but my brother, who is in the wine industry, was actually connected with him, probably from the event marketing. So I had credibility. I had some data points. I sent him a message because we're in the same group. I'm able to do that. Hey, I'd love to meet with you for a cup of coffee. I think I can, tell you in 30 minutes the ROI of social media. So we met, and the incredible thing is, people are asking questions in LinkedIn Answers. They're asking questions in LinkedIn groups. They're asking for help in LinkedIn status updates and tweets. And sometimes it can look really trivial. But a lot of the time, these are real business people with real problems that are looking for solutions. And he was the same. He's not going to say, look, I need to find a social media consultant. He's going to try to find someone in his own way, and that was through asking the question. So it turned out he had a client that he was doing the brand marketing for, and he didn't have social media expertise, and he was looking for someone that could partner with him. So he introduced me to his client, and 1 week later I had a signed contract. And this person became a very, very trusted part of my network, and he's introduced me to business beyond that as well. So once again, it doesn't happen to everybody, but there are business opportunities lurking behind every discussion that is in a LinkedIn group. So, another great case study of LinkedIn group engagement. This gentleman lives in Shenzhen, China. And he specializes in basically helping foreign companies design, manufacture, and export product throughout the world. So he's in Shenzhen, China, and his target market base is outside of China. And if you don't know how the Internet is blocked in China, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube are pretty much inaccessible in China. LinkedIn is the only site that is actually accessible there. So he decided with very little marketing budget that he was just going to use LinkedIn for his marketing. And he started joining groups, and he started meeting people. And he would take conversations offline, looking for deal flow, how he can help people, answering questions. And through the art of doing that, he started developing business. This gentleman now spends 2 to 3 hours a day on LinkedIn groups, just looking for conversations, for hints, looking for people, talking to people. And through the art of doing that, he's been able to generate 75% of his $5 million business. So we often talk about the ROI of social media. I think 2 to 3 hours a day to generate 75% of your sales is very, very good ROI. And obviously it depends on your industry, where your target market is, what have you, but it is potential to have LinkedIn become the primary marketing vehicle for your company, as this gentleman did here. And finally, another great slide or example is the California Workers' Compensation and Risk Conference. The amazing thing is that the owner of this conference, and this is a California group, the owner of the conference is actually in North Carolina. And her story is that this is all she does for a living, is have this one event. And the event's in California, and it's for a very, very targeted group of HR and other professionals. And the group only has 1,100 members, but through offering a discount to the conference, to the group, with a trackable link, she knows that 60% of her attendees, in other words, 60% of her annual revenue, comes from this LinkedIn group. So once again, there are tremendous business opportunities if you think outside of the box, and creating your own LinkedIn group is a great way to create a community which can yield business dividends for you in the future. And I think I'm going to hand it back over to Chuck for the final few slides.
Sounds great. Thanks, Neil, and great information. And I'm learning as we go along, which is always good. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the pay it forward aspect of LinkedIn. I have 11,500 connections. My book is linking into pay it forward for a reason. I truly believe that the internet in general and social media specific is basically the largest pay-it-forward playground we've ever had. So a really cool way with 11,500 connections. One of the reasons I have that is if somebody comes to me and has a need or a concern, needs a job, whatever it may be, I can go to 11,499 database and basically look at that and be able to help folks pay it forward in the process. So, and I could spend the whole hour talking about pay it forward stories that have occurred as a result of LinkedIn. Everything from seriously kidney transplants to fundraisers that have been done, all the way through to helping people find positions that then find other people positions later on. So just in general, wanted to mention that paying it forward is a really cool habit to have, and using LinkedIn is a really great way to be able to do that. So some cool stuff. So with that, I think we're going to move to the last couple of slides, and that is our contact information. I am Chuck Hester all over the web for a reason. That's a lot of branding work over the last 7 years on my part. And please feel free to contact me, link in with me, send me an invite. All you have to do is say, Chuck, I want to have you be part of my LinkedIn network, and your presentation rocked, and then I will definitely accept the invitation right away, and we'll just take it from there. So, and for Neil, I believe was our next slide. Sorry. Neil, if you wanted to talk to that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, my name is misspelled there, but pretty much if you do a search for Neil Schaeffer, SCHAFFER, that's my Twitter handle, LinkedIn.com. Website is windmillnetworking.com. Email address Neil at. Feel free to connect with me, and if I can be of any help to you or your company, just let me know. And if you go to Amazon or Kindle, iTunes, you'll be able to find these 2 LinkedIn books that I was talking about.
Sounds good. And with that, I think we'll turn it over for questions and answers.
Thank you, gentlemen. On behalf of BeaconLive, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Hester and Mr. Schaeffer, for presenting today on LinkedIn. Again, following the Q&A session, each of you will be delivered to a post-event evaluation where you can request to receive any of the newsletters or ebooks from these presenters. Now I'd like to invite you to send in your questions for Chuck and Neil using the chat pod in the lower left-hand corner of your browser. Simply type your question and press the send button. We do have a question here. Do you feel upgrading to a premium account, paying a monthly fee, is worth the cost, and why?
Neil, do you want to start with that? I know that's one where you and I kind of differ.
Yeah, so everything that Chuck and I talked about was using the free account. So it's not necessary to pay. However, it really depends on your objective. I find meeting companies that the people that are most aggressive on LinkedIn or use it the most are recruiters or salespeople. They're doing a lot of searches. They're reaching out to a lot of people they may not be connected with. They want to have a way of organizing all the people that they're prospecting into folders, or perhaps sending out InMails, or they want to get more than 100 search results per screen. So if that sounds like you may want to consider it, but it's definitely not essential. On the other hand, okay, if you're making 6 figures, or even if you're not making 6 figures, if your time on LinkedIn, if you're spending 15, 30 minutes a day and it becomes an essential part of the way that you do business, I think $20 a month is not a lot of money to spend. I think it's a very, very good investment. So it really comes down to objective, number 1. Number 2, those specific functionalities. And number 3, what's the ROI from LinkedIn? And people that are spending an hour or 2 a day on LinkedIn, I just think it makes good business sense. There are enough advantages, but that's going to be a personal and financial decision. Chuck?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, especially if you're a high-level executive job seeker and that's what you're really looking at. The one aspect of a paid account is you see there's a section called Who Viewed My Profile, and when you have a paid account, you see more people in that area, and that's one of my other Easter eggs, is to be able to contact people who have viewed your profile and ask how you can help them. That is another way for a connecting point. So I've kind of modified my view of that over the last year or so. It just, and as Neil mentioned, it just depends on what you're doing. Recruiting, sales, job seeking, potentially it is worth the effort.
Our next question, how do you handle branding when you have 2 very different companies you work for?
Well, first of all, a LinkedIn profile is a personal profile. So depending on where you are, I would definitely be careful of making sure that you don't have separate profiles for separate companies. It just depends on where you are with that. You can set up separate company pages and do it that way. I guess that would be the best way to put that. I'd have to see that information and be more specific on what you're asking before I could really give a qualified answer on that.
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, and branding is an art. There's no one right or wrong answer, and not one person can give you a right answer. But I will say, and this goes back to if you saw the Steve Jobs graduation speech of Stanford University, connecting the dots. A brand is something unique, right? So if you can find a way to uniquely tie together your experiences at those 2 very, very different companies, you are going to have something that's memorable and something that's going to be about only you that no one else can emulate. Good example, I was doing a LinkedIn sales training for a large insurance company, and a gentleman came up to me and saying, look, I'm new in the insurance industry, my background's IT, I feel like I'm out of place, should I just take the IT experience off my LinkedIn profile completely? And I said, no, that is a plus, right? You are an insurance agent and he was targeting other businesses and small businesses, in fact, that can also lend a helping hand on the IT side. He's going to be remembered more, and I think he's probably going to get more clients by having that IT edge and being able to help companies with a function that is a necessity, especially in this day and age of IT. So don't think of having two different experiences as a negative. Think of a unique way of connecting the dots, showcasing your strengths in a very, very positive and unique way.
Our next question. Is there a way to search for a specialty or business focus within someone's contact list?
Well, I guess I'll start. So, first of all, when we connect with each other, you'll notice that sometimes you can click on the number of connections and be able to see all of their connections, 30 users at a screen. But sometimes when you click on the connections, even if you're first degree, you can't see them. There's something called connections visibility or browse connections, which you can actually hide in your settings screen. Most salespeople hide that because they don't want their competitors to see which of their customers they're connected to. And maybe recruiters hide it as well. So I think that there's nothing wrong in hiding it. But the way that it happens is, how do people find out who's connected to who? It's when you do an advanced people search. When you find someone there with a certain specialty, and then you see who is the person that makes the connection. So I've had people say, hey, I want to search your connections, and I say, I'm not a walking Rolodex, and you're going to have to go through a few hundred screens to get through everybody. So there's no way of easily doing that. The only way of doing it is the advanced people search, and you look at who connects you, and that person comes up. And Chuck, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, that's exactly where I would head with that. And it is true that there's some people who are going to hide their connections. It just depends on what it looks like. And I think, Neil, you touched on the areas. It's the sales folks, it's recruiters, and it can be pharma folks as well who have regulatory issues that they don't want to have connections seeing what's going on. And again, that also points back to the fact that you as the user of LinkedIn have control, and you decide who can see what on your profile. You decide how you connect, and if you want to be anonymous on LinkedIn, you can be.
Our next question this afternoon. How would you recommend getting your customers to follow your company page?
One of the things that I would strongly suggest, first of all, is to make sure that your customers are connected with you directly on LinkedIn. And if they are, then you can actually send out a LinkedIn message to your customers, to your LinkedIn connections, saying, hey, you know what, our company page is up and running on LinkedIn. We'd love you to have you take a look at it. It's similar when you put a new Facebook fan page together. You would send out a marketing blast, if you want to call it that, and be able to tell folks that what's going on. I would suggest putting together a message through LinkedIn in particular with the connections that you've got. And if you don't, by the way, have that, you can also send out a link through email. You can link to your company page and say, hey, take a look at it. Look at our products and services. If you're so inclined, is one of my favorite phrases, if you're so inclined, feel free to like us and follow us. And that's a nice way to do that.
Yeah, it's not rocket science, as Chuck mentioned. It really is just like when you start a Facebook, Twitter, a blog, what have you, of getting the word out to your customer base. And I feel that very few companies actually go through the extra effort to do that. It's also, if you want to get people to join your LinkedIn company page, why would you have a Twitter and Facebook icon on your website and not have a LinkedIn icon that leads directly to your company page? And this is another area. Yeah, another area where I see companies fail. Companies have blogs. Why don't you have a LinkedIn share button on your blog if you really want to promote your presence on LinkedIn? So it's a combination of these things. But the other thing that I should mention here is, LinkedIn also does have an advertising platform. And you can advertise the fact that you have a company page to people that may not know you, and you're only paying per the click. So if you have a large marketing budget and you're already doing online ads, why not take 1% of that budget and start to do some targeted ads to expose your company page to target users in your industry?
Our next question, what is the value of InMail?
InMail is a service that is part of the paid accounts within LinkedIn. The value can be that you can actually contact people you're not connected with directly or also have InMail accounts. So it allows you, without having an email address, to be able to contact prospects or customers or candidates if you're a recruiter. So there is, again, the paid accounts have a tendency to fall into the sales, prospecting, recruiting aspect as to why most people use paid accounts, and InMail is one aspect of that. So it allows you to actually have messages. But frankly, I'm going to walk back a little bit on what I was talking about as far as paid accounts go. As Neil and I both have mentioned, if you're a member of a group, you can message anybody within that group. If you're connected in a certain way with folks, you should be able to message on LinkedIn without having to do InMail. So it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And again, I think that's the other aspect of it. Foundationally, you need to look at what you're trying to accomplish before you make a decision as to whether or not you're going to be using a paid account and therefore InMail.
Yeah, to add on what Chuck said, unfortunately in sales, a lot of decision makers are not on LinkedIn groups. And maybe they're third-degree connections, and it's hard getting an introduction. So I call these the Untouchables. How do you get in touch with the Untouchables on LinkedIn? You can try to find their secretaries and contact them, or personal assistants, or you can try to make a phone call, try to find an email address on their website, or use some other tricky techniques to do that. But the InMail, and you're paying for the privilege, gives you the ability to send an email to anybody who is on LinkedIn. And I think that is huge because you know that email is going to be delivered through the LinkedIn platform, and the person receiving the InMail knows that you paid for the privilege. In fact, you either spend $10 for the a la carte InMail, or it's part of the professional platform. So in my experience, I've had people that I never thought would respond. LinkedIn also says if nobody responds or if they decline it, you're going to get a credit if you get no response within 7 days. So I think social media, it's all part of this big experiment, and you're never going to know until you try. And I tell salespeople, if you haven't tried, try. Try it once, try it a few times. If you start to see the positive ROI from that, that's when you want to start thinking of a paid account, because the paid account will give you discounts. You'll get more InMails for less money if you have a pro subscription.
There you go.
Our next question, is there a way on LinkedIn to prevent a specific person from viewing one's profile?
Again, that goes back to what we talked about earlier. Within your account settings, you can set it up so that depending on your connection level, only certain people can actually see profiles. The other part of that is if you aren't comfortable with somebody connecting with you directly, then don't connect with them, for one thing. But you can, in your account settings, set up privacy settings so only certain people, certain levels of connections can actually see your profile information.
Yeah, it's at the connection level. There's no way to specifically pick people out. And this is the interesting thing is I find that Facebook in many ways has better privacy settings than LinkedIn does. And I've actually written a blog post asking LinkedIn to provide those sorts of privacy settings that I do believe that we need moving forward. So it's a great question. Sorry, it's not the answer that you want to hear, but there is some level of privacy that you can take.
We have time for one final question. Do you feel that LinkedIn ads are more appropriate for B2B or B2C, and why?
Neil, I'll have you start, and then I'll wrap up.
Yeah, it could be both. Who is your target audience? If you're targeting, college students, then obviously it's going to be Facebook, which I would consider primarily a B2C platform. If you're targeting executives or some of the professionals like in the IT and finance industry, if you're targeting six-figure household income, even if you have a B2C product, I think that LinkedIn can be very, very appropriate. So for B2B, it's really a no-brainer that LinkedIn is probably going to be more effective than Facebook because people are on LinkedIn for business. They're on Facebook for fun. So if you think about all that holistically, I would say in a general answer for B2B LinkedIn, for B2C Facebook, but depending on that professional demographic, for the B2C, there are areas where LinkedIn may be equally or even more effective than Facebook. One thing I will say, though, is that LinkedIn ads are expensive because you're targeting a very, very wealthy demographic. If you're used to paying half of Google ads on Facebook, you're probably going to be expecting to pay as much, if not twice more, to advertise on LinkedIn when compared to a Google. But it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality on LinkedIn. So you'll have to experiment yourself, but that would be my best advice.
Yeah, and I'd also mention both Neil and I are what I would call marketing LinkedIn Sherpas, meaning that we are guides as far as that goes. And it's difficult sometimes to try and do this on your own. And it really is important to find somebody who knows the platform and understands the ins and outs, and then can ask specific questions as to target audiences and how you want to approach them. And it may be ads, it may be groups, it may be answers. There's a wide variety of marketing tactics that you can use and strategies overall to use LinkedIn as a marketing profile, a marketing platform.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for presenting on LinkedIn today. We will have a copy of the recording posted on BeaconLive.com as an on-demand recording early next week. And on behalf of BeaconLive, thank you for attending our marketing webinar.